أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I'd like to begin with expressing what a great honor it is for me to be present and to be attending this conference. Simply because the MSA-PSG is deeply rooted in the development of Tashayyu in North America. Almost 30 years ago, when those of us who converted to Islam and were studying Tashayyu and were looking for books, the majority of the books that we found about Tashayyu and about the path of Ahl Bayt alayhim as-salam ajma'in came from two sources primarily. Either those books had the stamp of the Koja organizations in there, like World Federation or Tahriq Tarsai al-Quran or Bilal Muslim Mission, or when we opened the books, they had the stamp of MSA-PSG in those books. And those of you gathered in this conference, maybe you're not aware of this history that exists amongst us, the revert community, and what a large role this organization has played in that movement. Tashayyu has been introduced to this country, by and large, to those of us who are from here, born here, raised here, by means of the Islamic Revolution. There are not many Shias that existed here in our community before this revolution. And one of the paths through which we got this information, by which we became aware of the rights of Ahl Bayt and of Hazrat Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, was through this organization. So I was giving an example of a brother this morning. The first time I ever read the book Al-Muraja'at, it's translated into English as The Right Path. That book had the stamp of MSA-PSG in it. The first time I ever read Kitab al-Irshad, that book also had the stamp of MSA-PSG in it. And some of these books still exist in my library today with the MSA-PSG stamp inside of it. So it is a great honor for me, and I count it as a mark of pride, that I'm able to come here and to address this conference and this congregation based on the work that we have done over the last few decades to spread Tashayyu in North America. So the brothers had asked me to speak a little bit about the generation gap this morning. And so I wanted to take a few minutes of your time to read you a portion of this Hadith al-Thaqalain. Send a salawat. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال رسول الله إني تارك فيكم أمرين إن أخذتم بهما لن تذلوا كتاب الله عز وجل وأهل بيت إترتي. So Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, surely I'm leaving behind me with you two things, two very important issues, that if you take hold of these two issues, lan tadillu. And it's so beautiful. Lan is different from lam. Lan, lam noon in Arabic means never, ever, ever. It will never happen. Lam means it won't happen. Lan means it'll never happen. Prophet says, lan tadillu. If you take hold of these two issues, of these two weighty things, these two thaqalain, these two thaqil, heavy and important things, you will never ever go astray, says Hazrat Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he says those two things are the Kitab of Allah, the Book of Allah, and His family members. Now we're all knowledgeable about this hadith, and we all know of this hadith. I mean, it's one of those ahadith that nobody can deny. Nobody can turn their eyes away from it. It's like mutawatir. When we look at this hadith, we see, and we always talk about it from this point of view, that this hadith lays the foundation for Islamic theology. Yani that in this hadith, we are advised by Hazrat Rasul to take hold of Quran and the example of his Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, so that we may never go astray. Quran in and of itself is a beautiful document, and it is absolutely captivating to read. However, what exists in the Quran is concept, and it needs someone to bring it to life through their actions, through their example. And this is why Quran and Ahl Bayt alayhim salam are paired together. Because Quran is a series of beautiful mafahim, a beautiful message. And I like to call it Islam-e-Nazari. And this is what Quran is. Quran is Islam-e-Nazari, yani theoretical Islam, just like we have theoretical physics, right? But Ahl Bayt alayhim salam are Islam-e-Amali. They are that practical Islam. And through their example, we are able to learn how to correctly interpret and practice our religion. And so this is that theological foundation that we all know about and that we all understand completely. However, this hadith also teaches us something very important about family. And it might be something that we overlook frequently. You know, one thing that we see about family that was even mentioned by Ayatollah Jawadi in his discussion was that family is the basis of Islam. Islam, religion, has always been a family affair. You can look at the history of religion itself. You have Adam, Seth, Hawa. Right? These are prophets and the wife of a prophet. Right? You have Hazrat Yaqub and Yusuf, Ibrahim, Ismail, Ishaq, Sarah, Hajar, Musa and Harun, Dawood and Sulaiman, Zakaria and Yahya, Maryam and Isa, and Muhammad wa Ahl Bayt alayhim salam ajma'in. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So religion has always been a family issue. Sometimes when my Sunni friends come to me and they be like, you accepted Islam. How? Why did you become a Shia? It's very easy to understand. Religion has always been connected to family. Even when we say salawat, there's a certain part of the salawat that we don't recite, but it shows you how this connection goes back to ancient times. When we say salawat, we're saying Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad kama salayta ala Ibrahim wa ali Ibrahim. Oh Allah, bless Muhammad and the family of the Prophet Muhammad in the same way that you blessed Ibrahim and the family of Ibrahim. So religion and family go together like beans and rice. They belong together. And they can't be separated from each other. And this is part of that message that we get from this hadith Thaqalain. So, of course, in this pairing, there's that theological basis, but also there is this aspect of family and the importance of family. And we should understand, just to introduce where we're going with this, this is where we have to talk about this issue of generation gap. There's been a lot said about generation gap and the existence of a generation gap and how we're having trouble communicating with the younger generation and transferring our beliefs, our values, our identity to the generation that is following behind us. I think it would help if I read a little bit about the definition of a generation gap. So, a generation gap or generational gap is a difference of opinions between one generation and another regarding beliefs, politics, or values. In today's usage, generation gap often refers to a perceived gap between younger people and their parents or grandparents. Sociologists currently define generation gap as institutional age segregation. And this should give us an insight into what is the cause of this generation gap, as well as by what means we can overcome this generation gap. In my opinion, I've never run into a generation gap. I've got 9 kids and 2 grandkids, and we don't have any generation gap. And the problem here, as defined in this definition, is based on our communication with our young people. The communication that we engage in with our kids. Let's make it very straight. You cannot add 2 plus 2 and get 5. It's not going to happen. Whenever you add 2 plus 2, it will always equal 4. If we do the things that the society around us is doing, we will get the same result. Period. If we are not following Islamic guidelines in raising and educating and training our children, and if we're doing things just like, for instance, in my family, the way my parents did things, or the way my grandparents did things, or as we come and we live in the country for a longer period of time and we get settled down here and we get acclimatized and acculturized to the society, it's not enough to simply raise our children like everyone else raises their children. If we do that, we will get the same result that everyone else gets. If the only time we spend with our kids is just a few minutes during dinner or after dinner, and if the only time we communicate with our children is when we're angry or upset or have something disagreeable to say to them, this generation gap will exist. And the society around us is suffering from this generation gap precisely because they are not following Islamic guidelines in the raising and in the education of children. Now, I know you've heard this before. In Islam, we identify 3 stages of educating and raising our children. First stage is from the age of birth to the age of 7. Right? The second phase is from the age of 7 to the age of 14. And that final stage is from the age of 14 to the age of 21. Now, we all have heard these guidelines before, and the ulama have not been slack in their responsibilities in getting this message across to us, but we have fallen short in following these guidelines. So, let's make it clear. Prophet ﷺ, he says that from birth to age 7, the children are masters in the house. This is still a part of their period of education, but they learn through play. And so we should allow the children to play and to run and to jump and to enjoy as much as is possible. Of course, as they get closer to this age of 7, we also need to begin training them, and this is one place where we've fallen short. I'd written down in my notes some guidelines mentioned in a hadith from Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wa salam. Send a salawat. And I want you to realize how important these phases are, and that's why I'm reciting this hadith to you, so you can understand this method, how important it is to follow this method. Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam says, let your children play up to 7 years. Then keep them with you for education and training for another 7 years. Then, if he succeeds, this is well and good. Otherwise, there is no good in him. Did you hear what I said? There's no good in him. If your child has gone astray by the age of 14 or 15, we in the masjid can do very little to help you. A lot of times they want to bring the kids to the masjid at the age of 14, 15, 16, 17 and say, Maulana, my child don't listen. Please help me. What can I do with this 17-year-old? What am I expected to do with him? When Imam as-Sadiq says that if he passes these first two phases, then well and good. And if he gets to 14 and he hasn't learned these lessons, then there's no good in him, says Imam as-Sadiq. I know it's kind of a hard message, but I didn't say it, Imam Sadiq did, alayhi salatu wasalam. We are not paying attention to this middle period. So we have this period from birth to age 7, and generally we do a fairly good job from birth to age 7. I'll be very honest with you, I don't like the parents that bring their kids to the masjid and want the child to sit down, don't move, don't play, don't say anything, hey, don't run, come back, and try to control these little kids like they're supposed to be miniature adults. They're supposed to be kids. If I go to a masjid and there aren't kids running around and climbing and bouncing off the walls, something's wrong with those kids. Take them to the doctor. Get them some help. Give them some medicine. What's wrong with these kids? They're not running around and playing and making noise and climbing on the minbar. If they're not doing that, something's wrong. Something's wrong. If this child is just sitting there in the hall, mazloom, and just listening to what the Sheikh is saying, even though it goes right over his head, there's something wrong with that child. Or something wrong with the parents. So, for the most part though, from birth to age 7, we do a fairly good job in raising our children. Now there are some guidelines that are mentioned by Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam as an example. It's said by those asatid in Dars Akhlaq that from the moment that children start to dress up and pretend to be adults, it's the time to begin teaching them. You know, when little kids reach a certain age, they're going to try to put on your clothes, wear your shoes, put on your hat, and walk around and say, I'm Baba, or I'm Mommy, right? And they pretend to be adults. From the moment that children start doing this, it's time to begin training them. What age is that? It's usually around age 3. Okay, so it's not that for this first 7 years, they're just masters and they're just expected to play completely. That is their primary role and their primary function. But Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam says, when the child reaches 3 years of age, teach him 7 times to recite La ilaha illallah. Then leave him till he's almost 4 years old. Then train him to say Muhammadan Rasulullah. Then leave him till he completes 4 years, he's close to 5. Then teach him to say 7 times Sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Then leave him. Then see if he can distinguish between his right and his left hand. And when he knows the difference, then make him face the Qibla and tell him to do sajda. How many of us have done these things with our kids? How many of us have done these things with our kids? This is one of the mistakes that we make that can create this generation gap at this early age. We figure that he's not 7 yet. So he don't got to pray, he don't got to fast, he don't got to learn nothing. Just leave him, let him run and play. The closer we get to the age of 7, the more instruction that should be carried out with the child. Now then, we know that from age 7 to 14, this is that period of bandagi and abdigi for a child. Servitude for a child. Now, when we say that the child is a servant or a slave from 7 to 14, that don't mean you beat him like a slave. That don't mean that you chain him up in the house and keep him like a slave. It means that that child should be taught to obey and to follow the guidance given by his parents, as well as now pushed towards instruction and learning. And as I just mentioned, it's in this period from age 7 to 14 that we are failing and failing miserably in the raising of our children. And in my personal opinion, this is what's leading to this perceived generation gap. From the age of 7 to 14, we're supposed to be preparing these slaves, as they are termed in ahadith, for emancipation. These children are not going to be our slaves forever. They're not even going to be children forever. They might not even be ours forever. At some point they're going to move out and will have to make their own decisions and will have to guide their own lives. Our role, specifically from this age of 7 to 14, is to prepare them for emancipation. Instead, what we've done is extended their period of childhood. We often look at children in this age group from 7 to 14, even up to 14, as they're still children. And we don't lay upon them the responsibilities, not just of learning about their religion, but of accepting responsibility for themselves and their actions, and their works in their life. And this is a shortcoming. We want, kucheke, naze, he's a good bache, don't, aziyatish nakone. No! It's from the age of 7 that we have to now do a little bit of aziyat and bother the child a little bit. Child should be given instruction, not just intellectual instruction, not just religious instruction, but one of the most important things is instruction in life. One thing that leads to this perceived idea of a generation gap is our lack of communication with our children. We figure they're children. I'm not going to teach them about religion yet. They won't understand. No, they understand at that age better than you and I do. We're jaded. We've become cynical. We've become tired, disillusioned. The kids at that age are still hopeful and energetic. They are ready for religious instruction. We're the ones who aren't ready to give it. We say, they're kids still. They can't understand. Leave them. That's the time for religious instruction, from age 7 to 14. We say, no, your responsibility is just to go to school and get good grades and study hard. No, this is the time that we should be putting our kids in hardship. Yeah, that's what I said. Most of the time, from the age of 7 to 14, we want to protect our children and keep them away from hardship and from difficulties. When in fact, it's from the age of 7 to 14 that we should begin introducing them to difficulties and hardships. It's at this age that they should begin to make decisions between right and wrong. It's at this age that we should be giving them chores and work to be done in the home, within the family. A lot of people say, no, a 7-year-old is too young to wash dishes. Come to my house. Oh no, a 7-year-old, 8-year-old is too young to sweep and mop the house. They're not going to do it like me and you. But they will not learn how to do it until we have them do it. And most important, they will not learn to accept responsibility, to work hard for a cause and for the family, unless we push them in that direction. We're spoiling our children by extending this period of childhood. And it is great detriment to the upbringing of our children. Send a salawat. Let me find my place here. So difficulties are a part of life. And it's from this age that we have to begin introducing to them that difficulties, hardships are part of life. I run across so many young people that because they've been raised and coddled in a very caring and loving environment, which they should have, right? They have no sense of responsibility and no work ethic, and it's because we haven't pushed them in that direction. A lot of the young people are lazy. And it's because we haven't pushed them in the direction to work from an early age. A lot of our young people are living a Barbie life. Everything's just fantasy. It's all plastic. It's all make-believe. And they have this concept, a make-believe and a fantasy concept of life. We're setting them up for disillusionment and failure. It's at this age, between the age of 7 to 14, that we should begin to introduce to them that life has difficulties and hardships. And you can't run away from them. Just like you can't cry your way out of sweeping the floor, you cannot cry your way out of other difficulties and problems and challenges that you will face in life. You must confront difficulties and hardships and challenges and overcome them. Finally, one of the biggest mistakes that we're making in raising our children, and I mentioned this just very briefly, is in communication. And when I talk about communication, I'm not just talking about how was school today? What tests, because now is the time of testing, right? It's about Christmas break. What tests did you have today? How did you do in that? This is not enough. We should be communicating with our children from our own life experience. This is what's going to make them better believers. What keeps me and you on the right path? Why do we continue to pray? Why do we continue to follow? And why is it that some of our young people are straying? It's because we have learned over years of experience that this deen is beneficial to us. It assists us. And we never communicate to our children the successes that we've had in life. And even worse, right, which is more important, we never communicate with them the failures that we've faced in life. We keep these children somewhat removed from our own mistakes and our own shortcomings and failures in our life. And so one thing I always tell my kids is, look, I might not be able to tell you how to do it. I'm a jahil. I might not be able to tell you how to do it. But one thing for sure I can tell you is how not to do it. We've become mujtahid in this. I can't tell you how to do it, but definitely I can tell you how not to do it. I've gained this by doing it wrong repeatedly. We have to share that with our children, not just our successes, but our failures as well. You know, it's a fool. And I hear even some kids nowadays, even my own daughter comes and says, I want to make my own mistakes. What are you, Kharid? Are you a donkey? You want to make your own mistakes? A fool learns from making their own mistakes. A wise person learns from the mistakes of others. When a young person comes and says, I want to make my own mistakes, oh, you're a dummy. Don't make your own mistakes. Learn from the mistakes of others. And the best people that can teach the young people this are their parents. You look back, talk to your parents, talk to your grandparents. What you're going to find out is whenever they communicate with you some success or some failure that they've had in life, right? It's usually something that has to do with a difficulty, a hardship, something that they faced. And thus, because they confronted that difficulty and that hardship, and whether they failed or they overcame, they confronted it and they gained from it. And we can learn from that experience. The only generation gap that exists is the one that we have created. And what we said, generation gap is being called institutionalized age segregation. And this is not part of Islam. And we see that in the sunnah of Hazrat Rasul and his Ahl Bayt, alayhim salam ajma'een. So, let's finish here then. Just as man is the microcosm of the macrocosm, he is the representative, and within him are the signs of all else that is in the universe. As they say, as above, so below. The same is true of the family. The family is a microcosm of the society. Every illness, every fault, every inclination that exists in the society around us will affect our families as well. This is why we gather at these conferences, so that we can confront these issues and these challenges. So society has a large part to play in what is going on in the family, because family is a representation of what's going on in the society. But we should not assume that this relationship is only one directional, that only the society can have effect on our families. Where does revolution begin? And there's a lot of people who are going to come and talk about revolution, and they make a big hullabaloo, rah, 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 about revolution. Okay? Let's make it very clear. Revolution begins with the self, within our own selves. then it spreads to the family. And then from the family to the society at large. So it should not be perceived that only society is influencing family. It is entirely possible that family can influence society. And that's what we learn from Hadith al-Thaqalain. Hadith al-Thaqalain is not just a theological foundation for us. Hadith al-Thaqalain teaches us that the best means of protecting religion, ensuring faith and spirituality, and that the primary means of projecting religion, spreading religion to the society around us, is the family. That just as Prophet's family was tasked with the important aim of protecting religion and projecting and spreading religion, so too our families are having that same role and that same responsibility. It is within our own families that our religion, our spirituality, our faith will be protected, and it is through our families that our religion and our beliefs and our values can be spread to the rest of the society. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should grant His success, His tawfiq to each and every one of us as individuals and as members of a family. Ya Allah, have mercy on our souls, forgive us of our sins, and guide us always in your straight path. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ الْعَلِيُّ الْعَظِيمِ. Salawat.